In a quiet rural town, arrogant men eye Otis Freeman's farm like easy prey. An old heavy-set black man they dismiss as weak and slow. They don't know he's a retired Navy SEAL, shaped by decades of elite training and unshakable discipline. Beneath Otis' calm exterior lies a lifetime of strength and strategy. As threats escalate and violence looms, these men underestimate the fierce protector guarding his family's legacy. What starts as a land dispute soon ignites into a high-stakes battle for justice, forcing Otis to fight not just for his farm, but for his very survival. The morning sun painted long shadows across Otis Freeman's farm as he made his way through the dewy grass. His weathered overalls stretched across his broad frame, and despite his size, he moved with a deliberate grace that spoke of hidden strength. The wooden fence posts needed mending in places, and the old red barn's paint had begun to peel. But there was pride in how he maintained every inch of his family's land. Otis carried 2 heavy feed buckets, one in each hand, his thick fingers wrapped firmly around the metal handles. The chickens recognized his approaching footsteps and rushed to greet him, clucking excitedly around his boots. He scattered the feed in practiced arcs, watching as the birds pecked eagerly at their breakfast. "Morning, ladies," he said softly, his deep voice barely above a whisper. The gentle tone seemed at odds with his imposing presence. From the farmhouse porch, Shirley Freeman watched her husband with knowing eyes. She held 2 steaming mugs of coffee, her gray-streaked hair tied back neatly. "You're up early again," she called out, descending the worn wooden steps. Otis turned, a slight smile warming his face. "Sun doesn't wait for anyone, Miss Shirley." He set down the buckets and accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing in a familiar gesture of affection. Shirley's keen eyes surveyed the property alongside him. "Thompson's boy rode past again yesterday, 3rd time this week." Otis nodded slowly, taking a careful sip. "WD's people trying to send a message." "I expect they're getting bolder," Shirley said, her lawyer's mind already working through scenarios ever since that new development project was announced. The couple stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Their land stretched out before them, 60 acres that had been in Otis' family for 3 generations, bought with blood, sweat, and determination after emancipation. "Got that town meeting today?" Otis reminded her, moving toward the barn where the horses waited. Inside the barn, Otis began measuring out oats for the horses. His movements were methodical, practiced over decades. "They'll try something," he said matter-of-factly. "WD's been itching for a confrontation." Shirley leaned against a post. "You think they'll make their move at the meeting?" "Seems likely." Otis's voice remained even, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Public space. Witnesses. They'll want to make a show of it." By late afternoon, they drove their old pickup truck into town. The community center parking lot was already full, mostly with newer vehicles that spoke of money and status. Otis and Shirley entered together, heads held high despite the sideways glances and whispered comments. The meeting room was stuffy with too many bodies and not enough air conditioning. Plastic chairs scraped against linoleum as people settled in. Near the front, Wade Graham and his crew occupied an entire row, their presence impossible to ignore. Wade was younger than Otis by decades, with close-cropped hair and a perpetual sneer. His gang wore their prejudice like badges of honor. Confederate flag patches, provocative slogans, and an air of barely contained violence. The meeting began with ordinary business, budget reports, road maintenance schedules, upcoming events. But when the topic turned to the new development project, Wade stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "Before we go any further," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the room, "we need to address the elephant in the room." His eyes fixed deliberately on Otis. "Some folks here are sitting on land they've got no right to." A tense silence fell over the room. Otis remained seated, his expression neutral, but his massive hands rested calmly on his knees. Wade continued, growing bolder with each word. "My grandfather sold that land to proper farmers, not squatters claiming some ancient right. We've got documentation that proves it." "Your grandfather's documentation wouldn't hold up in any court," Shirley spoke up, her voice sharp with legal authority. "The Freeman family has clear title going back to 1866. "Nobody asked you, woman," one of Wade's crew spat out. "We're talking about real property rights here." Otis finally stood, his movements slow and deliberate. His size seemed to fill the room, though his voice remained quiet. My great-grandfather purchased that land fair and square. We've worked it, lived on it, made it prosper for over 150 years. Wade stepped closer, his face reddening. You people always think you can take what isn't yours. That land should be part of the new development. Progress, you know. But you're holding everyone back, sitting there like a fat old fool who doesn't know when his time's up. The room crackled with tension. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement with Wade. Otis simply looked at the younger man, his expression unchanged. But something in his steady gaze made Wade's swagger falter slightly. The deeds are registered at the courthouse, Otis said evenly. Anyone who wants to check is welcome to do so. Now, unless you have actual business for this meeting, I believe we were discussing the road maintenance schedule. The drive home from the meeting was quiet, with only the crunch of gravel under tires breaking the evening silence. Otis parked their old pickup in its usual spot beside the farmhouse, but neither he nor Shirley moved to get out right away. They're not going to let this go, Shirley said finally, her hands folded in her lap. Otis nodded slowly. No, they're not. He turned off the engine, but kept his large hands on the steering wheel. WD's been waiting for an excuse. That development project just gave him one. Inside the farmhouse, Shirley moved through their familiar kitchen, pulling out ingredients for dinner. Her movements were sharp, precise, a reflection of her years as an attorney. We should document everything, she said, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Every interaction, every threat. Build a paper trail. Already started, Otis replied. He pulled a small notebook from his overall pocket. Times, dates, witnesses. Just like you taught me. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. The screen door creaked, followed by 3 quick knocks, a familiar pattern. Come on in, Dre. Otis called out without turning around as DeAndre Willis stepped into the kitchen, his young face tight with tension. At 21, he carried himself with the weary alertness of someone who'd learned early to watch his back. Heard about what happened at the meeting, he said, accepting the glass of sweet tea Shirley offered. Words spreading fast. Pull up a chair, son, Otis said, gesturing to their worn kitchen table. You look like you got something on your mind. Dre sat, his fingers drumming restlessly against the glass. People are talking about forming groups, watching each other's properties. The younger folks were tired of taking this kind of disrespect. Shirley paused in her cooking, exchanging a knowing look with Otis. And what do you think about that? She asked carefully. I think. Dre struggled with the words. I think I'm angry all the time. My granddaddy faced the same garbage. And now here we are, still fighting for what's already ours. His voice cracked slightly. How do you stay so calm, Big O? How do you just let them talk to you like that? Otis leaned forward, his massive frame making the kitchen chair creak. Who says I'm letting them do anything? His voice was quiet but carried weight. There's a difference between keeping calm and being passive. One's a choice, the other's surrender. He stood up, motioning for Dre to follow. They walked out onto the back porch where the evening air was cooling. Otis pointed to seemingly random spots around the property. See those new fence posts, motion sensors, those security lights connected to a silent alarm? That old shed houses 4 high-definition cameras with night vision. Dre's eyes widened slightly. You've been preparing? Since the day I bought this place, Otis confirmed. Being ready isn't the same as being afraid. It's about respect for yourself, your family, your legacy. Inside, they could hear Shirley on the phone, her voice carrying the sharp authority that had once commanded courtrooms. Yes, I need to speak with Marcus at the county records office. Yes, I'll hold. The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. Dre watched as Otis methodically checked each lock, each security measure. You really think they'll try something? Dre asked. Already have. Otis replied, pointing to fresh tire tracks near the property line. Been driving by, testing responses, looking for weak spots. He paused, considering his next words carefully. When you've seen as much as I have, you learn to read the signs. Wade's crew, they're building themselves up to something. Each threat, each drive-by. It's like a countdown. As if on cue, the distant rumble of engines broke the evening quiet. Headlights appeared on the access road, then quickly went dark. Otis's hand fell on Dre's shoulder, guiding him inside. Time for you to head home, son. Take the back road. But I could help. Dre started to protest. Best help you can give is being smart, being safe. Otis cut him off firmly. Go on now. After Dre left, Otis moved silently through the darkening house. Shirley watched from the kitchen as he pulled on a dark jacket and checked something in his pocket. Be careful, she said simply. Always am. He kissed her cheek and slipped out into the night. From his hidden position in the old oak tree stand, Otis had a clear view of his property. The Graham gang's trucks had parked just out of sight of the main road. 5 figures moved through the darkness, carrying cans of spray paint and what looked like baseball bats. They started with the fence posts, smashing them methodically. Spray paint cans hissed as they worked, leaving crude symbols and racial slurs in garish colors. Wade supervised from the middle of the group, his voice carrying in whispers across the quiet field. Send the message, he urged his crew. Show them what happens when they don't know their place. Otis remained motionless in his hiding spot, his expression unreadable in the darkness. His hand rested near his pocket where a small device recorded everything. Each crash of splintering wood, each hateful word spray painted across his property, all of it documented, just as Shirley had taught him. Dawn broke over Otis' farm, revealing the full extent of the previous night's vandalism. The morning dew mixed with splintered wood and neon paint, creating an ugly contrast against the peaceful landscape. Otis walked the property line methodically, his work boots leaving heavy impressions in the wet grass. He paused at each damaged section, taking photos with his phone. The racial slurs sprayed across his fence posts made his jaw tighten, but his movements remained deliberate and calm. From the farmhouse porch, Shirley watched her husband work, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus, I know it's early, but this can't wait, she said, her voice carrying the authority of her courtroom days. We need to file a police report and get ahead of this. Otis looked up as Dre's old Chevy pulled up the dirt drive. The young man jumped out, his face darkening at the sight of the destruction. Man, this is wrong, he said, jogging over to help. Let me grab some tools from my truck. Appreciate it. Otis nodded, already sorting through his own toolbox. He pulled out a level and some fresh lumber he'd stored in the barn. We'll start with the corner posts. They hit those hardest. As they worked, Otis' movements revealed a precision that seemed at odds with his large frame. He measured twice, cut once, and positioned each new post with tactical consideration. Sight lines, he murmured almost to himself, adjusting an angle slightly. What's that? Dre asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Nothing important, Otis replied, but his eyes scanned the tree line with practiced efficiency. Shirley brought them water around midday, her face tight with frustration. Legal aid's backed up for weeks, she reported. And the police? They're looking into it. The sarcasm in her voice was sharp enough to cut. They ain't going to do nothing, Dre said bitterly. Same as always. They'll do something when we have enough evidence, Otis said quietly. He pulled out his phone, showing them the morning's photos. Everything documented, time-stamped, with GPS coordinates. The day wore on, hot and heavy. By sunset, they'd replaced most of the damaged sections. Otis insisted on finishing the work himself as darkness approached, sending Dre home despite his protests. Something don't feel right, Dre said before leaving. Let me stay? Help keep watch. Best help you can give is staying clear, Otis replied firmly. Trust me on this. Inside the farmhouse, Shirley paced the kitchen. They're escalating, she said, watching headlights pass on the distant road. Each attack gets bolder. Otis nodded, checking something on his tablet. Security camera feeds showed multiple angles of their property. Got movement on the back 40, he said calmly. 3 vehicles, lights off, coming in from the south access road. Shirley's hands clenched. Should we call the police? Already did, Otis replied, his voice steady. Anonymous tip about suspicious vehicles. They'll take their time responding, but it'll be on record. He stood up, moving with surprising quietness for his size. Stay inside, away from windows. Call that news contact of yours, the one with the drone camera. The first firebomb crashed through the barn window at 10:47 p.m. The explosion lit up the night, followed quickly by 2 more. Flames leaped into the darkness as whooping voices carried across the field. Gunshots cracked the air, sharp, amateur shots that found targets among Otis' livestock. From his concealed position in the reinforced pump house, Otis watched through military-grade night vision goggles. Wade Grimes' voice carried clearly through his directional microphone. Burn it all. Let's see them try to keep this place now. The gang moved with drunk confidence, unaware of the infrared cameras recording their every move. They didn't notice the small devices Otis had installed that morning, capturing crystal-clear audio of their threats and celebrations. Inside the farmhouse, Shirley maintained her composure, speaking clearly into her phone. Yes, I'm watching it happen right now. Multiple perpetrators, armed, committing arson and destruction of property. Yes, we have video evidence. No, I'm safe. The heat from the burning barn painted everything in hellish orange light. More gunshots rang out, followed by the pained sounds of dying animals. Through it all, Otis remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled and steady. His large hands moved with practiced efficiency over familiar equipment, communications gear, surveillance monitors, and other tools that seemed out of place on a simple farm. The gang's attack grew more frenzied. They broke windows, shot out security lights, and spray-painted more slurs across the farmhouse walls. Wade Grimes' voice rose above the chaos. Come on out, old man. Face us like a man, if you got the guts. But Otis stayed hidden, watching, recording, preparing. His expression remained neutral as he activated a series of switches on his belt. Around the property, hidden systems hummed to life, unnoticed by the intruders who thought they had the upper hand. The night air thickened with smoke as Otis moved like a ghost through his property. His large frame melted into shadows with practiced ease, each step calculated and silent despite his size. The burning barn cast dancing shadows that worked to his advantage, creating shifting patterns of darkness, perfect for concealment. Through his night vision goggles, he watched Wade's men spread out, drunk on their own success. They'd made every amateur mistake in the book. No proper watch, no coordination, and worst of all, no respect for their surroundings. Their flashlight beams swept wildly, creating perfect blind spots. Otis touched his throat mic. Surely stay low. It's starting. His wife's acknowledgement came as a single click in his earpiece. The first trip wire activated near the old tractor shed, a simple device, fishing line connected to a row of tin cans. But in the tense atmosphere, the sudden clatter sent two gang members spinning around, firing blindly into the darkness. Their shots went wide, exactly as Otis had predicted. What was that? One shouted, voice cracking. Jimmy, that you? Otis pressed a button on his belt. Across the property, small speakers he'd hidden that morning came to life, broadcasting recorded sounds, footsteps in dry leaves, twigs snapping, whispered voices. The gang members' heads whipped around, trying to track multiple threats that didn't exist. Basic psychological warfare, Otis whispered to himself, remembering training exercises from decades ago. Disorient and divide. Wade Grimes' voice carried across the yard. Stop jumping at shadows, you idiots. Find that old man. Otis moved to his first target, a heavy-set man with a shotgun who'd separated from the others. The gang member never saw the cord at ankle height. He went down hard, shotgun clattering away. Before he could shout, Otis's massive arm wrapped around his throat in a perfect blood choke. Seconds later, the man was unconscious. Sleep it off, Otis muttered, zip-tying the man's hands and removing his weapons. He clicked his radio twice. Shirley would understand. Mark the location for police evidence later. The gang's confidence began to crack. Their shots came faster, more erratic. Otis triggered more distractions, a floodlight here, a recorded animal sound there. Each time they fired at nothing, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions. Something ain't right, one of them called out. Wade, this feels wrong. Otis smiled grimly. Fear was setting in. He moved to his next position, deliberately stepping on a branch. The crack echoed through the night. 3 gang members spun toward the sound, but Otis was already elsewhere, circling behind them that a flashbang he'd positioned earlier detonated on cue, followed by smoke grenades rolling across the ground. The chemicals weren't dangerous, but the gang didn't know that. They stumbled, coughing and cursing. Perfect targets for Otis' next phase. He picked them off systematically. A precise strike to a knee here, a shoulder lock there. Each takedown was controlled, designed to disable without causing permanent damage. His SEAL training emphasized efficiency over brutality. He's everywhere, someone screamed. The night dissolved into chaos as gang members fired at shadows and ran into each other. Wade Grimes stood by his truck, trying to rally his men. "Stand your ground, you cowards. It's just one old man." Otis' voice, electronically distorted through hidden speakers, filled the air. "You boys picked the wrong farm." The words seemed to come from everywhere at once. The psychological effect was immediate. Two more gang members broke for their trucks. Otis let them go. They'd spread the word better than any warning he could give. Then came the moment he'd planned for. Billy Graham, Wade's younger brother, stepped right into Otis' most elaborate trap. The snare, built from heavy-duty cable, caught his leg and yanked him upward. He dangled 6 feet off the ground, screaming in pain and terror. "Billy!" Wade's shout carried real fear. "Now where are you?" Otis triggered his last set of lights, powerful LEDs that created a disorienting strobe effect. In the chaos, he approached Billy's hanging form. The young man's eyes widened as Otis emerged from the smoke like a nightmare, his massive silhouette backlit by the burning barn. "Please," Billy whimpered. "Don't kill me. Not my style." Otis replied calmly, then delivered a precise strike that left Billy limp but breathing. Wade and his remaining men found Billy minutes later, after Otis had disappeared back into the shadows. The cable had cut deep into Billy's leg, and he'd need medical attention. They struggled to get him down, cursing and panicking. "Fall back," Wade finally ordered, helping carry his unconscious brother to the truck. "Fall back now." Otis watched them retreat through his thermal scope, their heat signatures bright against the cool night. Their trucks peeled out on the gravel road, leaving behind weapons, wounded pride, and enough evidence to bury them legally. Standing in the shadows of his burning barn, Otis' silhouette remained calm and still. His breathing was steady, heart rate normal, just like countless operations in his past life. He clicked his radio 3 times, signaling all clear to Shirley. The fire department sirens wailed in the distance, finally responding to the blaze. Otis knew the police would arrive conveniently late, but that didn't matter anymore. The game had changed, and his opponents had no idea who they were really dealing with. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across Otis' farm. Yellow police tape fluttered around the smoldering remains of the barn, and news vans had already gathered at the property line like vultures. Inside their kitchen, Otis and Shirley watched the local Channel 8 news broadcast with growing disbelief. The footage showed only carefully selected clips: Billy Graham hanging from the cable, injured gang members being loaded into ambulances, and Wade's tearful interview. "We were just checking on old Freeman." Wade's voice cracked perfectly on camera. "Heard some strange noises. Wanted to make sure he was okay. Then, out of nowhere, violence. Military-grade weapons. Could have killed my brother." Shirley's coffee cup hit the table hard. They edited out the firebombs, the racist graffiti, everything. "Of course they did," Otis replied, his calm voice masking deep anger. "Channel 8's owned by Wade's cousin." The reporter's voice continued. "Sources say Otis Freeman, a local farmer with suspected militant ties, may have been stockpiling weapons." Concerned citizens gathered to investigate suspicious activity when they were allegedly attacked with excessive force. Dre burst through the screen door, out of breath. "Y'all seeing this? They're saying you assaulted them. It's all over social media too." Shirley pulled out her phone, scrolling through local Facebook groups. Post after post showed the same doctored clips, accompanied by angry comments. "Dangerous militant needs to be locked up. This is what happens when they take our land. Sheriff needs to do something." "We have the real footage," Otis said, nodding toward his security cameras. "Shows everything." "Already downloaded it," Shirley replied. "But Channel 8 won't air it. And look at this. The Graham family's lawyer is calling for your arrest." Outside, more news vans arrived. Reporters shouted questions through the fence, their cameras pointed like weapons. A small crowd had gathered too, mostly white faces wearing hostile expressions. Dre paced the kitchen. "This ain't right. We gotta show people what really happened." "Working on it," Shirley said, typing rapidly on her laptop. "Trying to reach some national outlets. But these local stations are painting Otis as some kind of black militant terrorist." Otis stood, his massive frame blocking the morning light through the window. "Need to talk to Mike," he said quietly. "Sheriff Latimer." Dre scoffed. "Man, he's probably in Wade's pocket too." "Maybe," Otis replied. "But he knows me. 20 years of being neighbors counts for something." Shirley touched his arm. "Be careful. This isn't just about the farm anymore. The drive into town felt different. People who normally waved now turned away. Outside the diner, a group of men glared as Otis's truck passed. The fear his night of defense had instilled was being transformed into anger by Wade's media manipulation. The sheriff's office was busy. Deputies whispered and stared as Otis walked in. His size normally commanded respect, but today it seemed to make people nervous, like his mere presence confirmed their worst suspicions. Sheriff Mike Latimer's office door was open. The old lawman sat behind his desk, looking tired and uncomfortable as Otis filled the doorway. "Come in, Otis," Mike said quietly. "Close the door." Otis sat, the chair creaking under his weight. For a moment, neither man spoke. "Got quite a situation here," Mike finally said, not meeting Otis's eyes. "You know what really happened, Mike. What I know and what I can prove are different things." The sheriff shuffled some papers. "Wade's got 3 witnesses saying you attacked them unprovoked. Got medical bills, property damage. They burned my barn." Otis's voice remained level. "Killed my livestock. Tried to run me off my land. Any proof? Security footage. Clear as day." Mike finally looked up, his face pained. "Footage gets corrupted. Witnesses change their minds. You know how things work here. Thought you were different, Mike." The sheriff stood, pacing behind his desk. "I got the county commissioner breathing down my neck. Got citizens demanding action. Wade's family owns half the businesses in town. And that makes it right. Makes it complicated." Mike snapped, then softer. "I got no choice, Otis. There's a warrant for your arrest. Assault, excessive force, suspected weapons violations." Otis didn't move. "That how it's going to be? Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Mike's hand drifted toward his gun. "Come in quiet. We'll sort this out proper." Through the office window, Otis could see Shirley and Dre arriving in her car. They'd followed him, worried. "Smart. Think I'll decline," Otis said, standing slowly. "You want me? You'll need to find me first." "Don't do this," Mike pleaded. "System works if you work with it." "System's broken, Mike. Has been for a long time." Otis turned to leave. "You just been pretending not to notice." "Otis," Mike called after him. "You leave now, there's no going back." But Otis was already moving through the station, his size parting deputies like water. None made a move to stop him. They'd seen what happened to Wade's gang. Outside, Shirley and Dre rushed to meet him. "They're really charging you?" Dre asked, disbelief in his voice. "Get in the car," Otis replied calmly. "Both of you. We got work to do." Through the station window, Sheriff Latimer watched them drive away, his face a mask of conflict and regret. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees as Otis' truck wound down back roads he'd known since childhood. In the rearview mirror, police lights flashed in the distance, but they were searching main roads, amateur moves that made him shake his head. "They'll check the farm first," Shirley said from the passenger seat, her phone buzzing constantly with messages. "Then your sister's place in Marshall County." "Let them," Otis replied, turning down an unmarked dirt path. "Won't find anything worth finding." Dre sat forward from the back seat. "Where are we heading, Big O?" "Got spots they don't know about. Places I set up years ago. Navy taught me more than just fighting." The truck climbed a steep hill, branches scraping the sides. At the top, a small hunting cabin sat nearly invisible among the trees, its weathered wood blending perfectly with the forest. "Pull around back," Shirley instructed. "Less visible from the air if they bring helicopters." Inside, the cabin was sparse but prepared. Otis moved with purpose, pulling up floorboards to reveal cache supplies: water, food, first aid, and several hard drives. "Your surveillance footage?" Dre asked. "Copies," Otis nodded. "Originals somewhere safer. Never keep all your intel in one place." Shirley had set up her laptop using a satellite connection that couldn't be easily traced. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed emails to old contacts. "Marcus at the ACLU is reviewing the case," she reported. "And Reverend Jackson's office called back. They're mobilizing supporters." "What about the footage?" Dre paced the small cabin. "Can't we just put it online?" "Not yet," Otis replied, checking the windows. "Need the right timing. Release it too soon, they'll find ways to discredit it." Police sirens wailed in the distance, then faded. Otis' phone buzzed. A text from a sympathetic deputy warning that roadblocks were going up on county lines. "They're pushing the dangerous militant angle hard," Shirley said, reading news updates. "Sheriff's office is claiming you have an arsenal hidden on the farm. Only arsenal I got is up here. Otis tapped his temple. And they ain't ready for that. As darkness fell, they moved again. Otis led them through the woods on foot, using night vision gear from his SEAL days. They crossed streams to mask their trail and avoided obvious paths. 2 hours later, they reached another safe house, an abandoned church deep in the woods. Local kids thought it was haunted, which kept them away. Perfect cover. Inside, Otis set up a small command center. Multiple screens showed different camera feeds from around his property. They watched as police searched the farm, Wade Grimes strutting around like he owned the place already. Look at this. Shirley called them over to her laptop. She played a clip from the local news. Townspeople they'd known for years calling Otis dangerous, demanding action. The fear in their eyes seemed real. They actually believe it, Dre said quietly. All these years, they really think you're. They believe what's easier to believe. Otis replied, his voice heavy. Black man defending his land must be violent. Must be dangerous. Tales old as the soil we're standing on. He pulled up the real footage on another screen. The images were crystal clear. Wade's gang setting fires, shooting animals, screaming racial slurs. Their attack was methodical, practiced. They'd done this before.